Get right to it here. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify on my amendments to the fiscal 2018 Department of Defense Appropriations Act. Now, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I have offered 2 amendments this year for which I respectfully urge you to make an order. These bipartisan amendments are very straightforward. As you know, I've come before this committee many times on this critical issue of war and peace. My first amendment is Leo 74, and it would, after 240 days of enactment of the act, repeal the 2001 authorization to use military force, which Congress passed into law September 14, 2001. Now, this would give 8 months for Congress to debate and vote on a new authorization, should that be what the American people and what members of Congress decide to do. This is the same amendment that was passed out of the Appropriations Committee on June 29th on a bipartisan basis, but it was unilaterally, and Mr. Chairman, we've talked about this, it was undemocratically stripped in the committee print last week. I don't know how that happened. My second amendment, Lee 071, would, after 240 days of enactment of the act, prohibit funding for the 2001 AUMF. The 2001 authorization took 3 days, mind you, 3 days for a congressional vote. My amendment provides 8 months. And I want to just lay out the length of time that it has taken for Congress to authorize the majority of prior conflicts. In terms of Germany declaring unrestricted submarine warfare in World War II, 33 days the president requested. It took 4 days for Congress to pass it. Pearl Harbor, same day that the president brought it forward. Germany declares war, it took 5 days. The Gulf of Tonkin it was the same day actually when the president presented it. The invasion of Kuwait, it took 4 days. The 2001 AUMF that we're talking about today, it took 3 days. 3 days. The Syria chemical attack weapons, it took 10 days. And of course, the ISIS campaign, President, 240 days we're into it, there has been no request for an authorization. So 8 months, Mr. Chairman, is plenty of time for Congress to do its job. Now, this last amendment that I'm talking about is not subject to a point of order since it's a mere prohibition of funds targeting the 2001 AUMF. I've offered both of these amendments along with Walter Jones, Justin Amash, Mark Sanford, Adam Schiff, Jim McGovern, Keith Ellison, and Peter Welch. We're working in a bipartisan way to accomplish this goal. And as many of you know, I voted against the 2001 AUMF, which I believe was a blank check to wage war anytime, any place, for any length. Our brave servicemen and women, they continue to be deployed around the world. Congress is missing in action when it comes to our constitutional duty. And so on September 14, 2001, yes, I cast the lone vote against this authorization because I believed it opened the door for any president to wage endless war without a congressional debate or a vote. Now, according, and I've cited this before, but I'd like, Mr. Chairman, to put this into the record today, the 2016 Congressional Research Service, which I encourage all of my colleagues to read, it found that the 2001 AUMF has in fact become a blank check for war. And I have that report again, and I would like to insert it into the record.
Without objection, we'll enter that into the record. I would also ask the gentleman if she would allow to be entered the record the release from President Barack Obama February 11, 2015 about his letter to Congress concerning his ideas about AUMF.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll enter both those.
I think that's very important.
Yes, ma'am.
This resolution, the 2001 authorization, 16 years, it's been used at least 37 times in 14 countries with little or no congressional oversight. Now, this report only looks at unclassified incidents, and this was, again, a couple of years ago. How many other times has it been used without the knowledge of Congress or the American people? And how many times since this report was issued has it been used? Not only has this authorization been used to justify military action thousands of miles away, it's also been used much closer to home to allow warrantless surveillance and wiretapping, indefinite detention practices at Gitmo, targeted killing of drones, including of American citizens, and the open-ended expansion of military operations abroad. Right now, we know that any president can unilaterally wage war under this outdated 2001 authorization. The last two presidents have bombed the Middle East and Africa. According to a U.S. News and World Report, it's been used from the Philippine archipelago to Yemen and Somalia. And President Trump is following down a similar path. The administration has launched airstrikes against Syria, sent more troops to fight ISIS, and is contemplating sending thousands of additional troops to Afghanistan. I know that while we may not share, Mr. Chairman, a common position on the replacement of a 2001 AUMF, many of us do agree that the overly broad authority is a major and concerning deterioration of congressional oversight and war-making authority. Clearly, with the passage of my amendment in the full Appropriations Committee markup, there is bipartisan support. And I know many of us have also agreed on both sides of the aisle that a robust debate and vote is necessary. It's long overdue and it must take place. The fact of the matter is, with the 2001 AUMF still on the book in its current form, any administration can continue to rely on this blank check to wage endless war. That's why both of these amendments are so important. Congress cannot continue to abdicate its constitutional responsibility while the United States is embroiled in yet another open-ended war in the Middle East. I'm here before you to ask you to look at both of these amendments. Both are very important. I would like my bipartisan amendment, which was stripped undemocratically from the committee print, made in order under this rule. And I strongly urge this committee to rectify wrong and allow a debate and vote on this important issue. I understand that Speaker Ryan has said that it was a mistake to include my amendment and that it would endanger our national security, and I'd like to just briefly address that. Both of my amendments would allow Congress and the executive branch plenty of time to debate and vote on any new authorization. As I mentioned earlier, in matters of national security, Congress acts swiftly. 8 months is a long time. We passed the AUMF, the 2001, within 3 days. Surely Congress can muster the courage to debate and vote on a replacement within 8 months. I'm also aware that many members have expressed concern that the bill language amendment did not come through the authorizing committee. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, the 2001 authorization did not even have a committee hearing and went straight to the floor. However, given that there were over 100 policy riders this time attached to the fiscal year 2017 Consolidated Appropriations Act, this should not have been a legitimate barrier to protecting my amendment in the bill. And that's why I'm here today with an alternative amendment that would not be subject to the point of order, as it is a straight funding limitation under this Appropriations Act. More importantly, this amendment was made in order last year under this bill. I've heard from many colleagues on both sides of the aisle that they want to repeal and replace immediately. I'm supportive of that effort, but the bottom line is that we have to have this debate and the vote. Some have said that this is political, and I say just the opposite, Mr. Chairman and members. Our brave troops deserve us to come together and do this so that they know that their country has their back. My amendments today will help jumpstart that effort and force Congress to finally do its job. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and once again, I respectfully request this committee to make these important amendments in order under the rule for this appropriations bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those of you who have just come to the committee tonight, we're attempting to knock these out one at a time and then allow that member to exit and leave rather than sticking around for 4 or 5 hours. And so we're going to do that. Ms. Lee, let me say this to you. I have rarely am I approached by someone as not only as sincere, but as genuine as you are. The gentleman Walter Jones, a very dear friend of mine, approached me several months ago with an indication that he had filed a bill of which the Rules Committee was part of that jurisdiction, chaired by the gentleman from California, Mr. Royce. Mr. Royce and I met very seriously to understand this. We believed at the time that it was important to engage from the purpose of an analysis about money and time and ideas that we were going to approach the gentleman, the Secretary of State, about his ideas, about the Secretary of Defense about his ideas, and to allow the White House, NSA, to do the same. I believe that we are going to approach this. I believe we will pass, and nobody will ever be happy that simply wants us to stop all combat operations. But I will say this, I am unilaterally for it no matter what. That if a President of the United States finds that maybe in Tora Bora, that there's somebody over in a far part of Afghanistan who's preparing to dump 3 or 4 or 5 airplanes on this country, and that the mission is being planned out of somewhere by people who want to destroy this country and kill thousands of people. If we do not give that president that authority, if we wind this so darn tight that the president has his hands wrapped around something that he can't get at that, we are making a mistake. I believe the United States military, from all indications that I have, is full of people who are very thoughtful and very careful, but they are given one job. And I've met with Admiral Harris out in Pearl Harbor, and every single time he says their sole job is to protect the homeland of this country. I raised my hand to promise that I would support and defend the Constitution, and that would include where you're coming from, and that is to make sure that the philosophy behind the use of dollars and the policy that would be done. But I guarantee you, we're going to get at it, and we're going to approve something that says that the President of the United States needs to consult with us, but that we need to make sure we defend this country, because I guarantee you there are lots of deep, dark places that we have never even heard of, and there are evil people who are against us. So the gentlewoman's going to get her argument, and she's going to get her vote, and I'm going to make sure that happens, because I want to make sure that we allow our United States military anytime, any place in this world to drop a package within about 10 feet of somebody that wants to bomb our country, harm my wife, my children, and people in this country. And I will guarantee I'll pay for that myself to deliver that package. And,
Mr. Chairman, can I just respond by saying this is not about the substance of
Right.
any authorization, and you're talking about what possibly the
well, if you
substance
wrap
would
us
be.
too tight around the axle and require
8
certain
months.
things.
No, I'm just requiring
we're
8
gonna,
months.
I already told you, we're going to have that debate for 8 months. And we're going to get into it, and you're even going to get your vote. But what I'm suggesting to you is it ought to say anytime, any place, anywhere, but that on an appropriation cycle, you'll get a chance to either fund, vote yes or no for the military. You know what the military is doing, and so do I, and so does every member. You know what they're out there and doing. So to think and say that the people who are out there deserve this debate, they give their lives defending something so that our children, our wives are safe. And so we're going to do that. We're going to take you up on it. I want to take you up on it, because I quite honestly want to make sure everybody in this body gets a chance to vote, especially for the next election, just where we know who's for it and who's against it, because I guarantee you it's going to be important. Mr. Cole?
Thank you very much. I want to thank my friend for being here, not that I ever doubted she would be here. And I want to thank her for what she's done. We would not be having this discussion were it not for my friend's persistence in here, and frankly for her far-seeing analysis of the 2001 AUMF. You were exactly right. What you saw at the time and nobody else in the chamber saw has indeed transpired. We have given war-making authority so broadly that very different presidents with very different points of view have been able to go to war pretty much whenever and wherever they wanted to. And many of those actions, quite frankly, I support, but they didn't come here and ask. You can be very critical of George Bush 41 or George Bush 43. The history will debate whether they were right or wrong in the Gulf War and the actions against Afghanistan and Iraq in 2001 and 2002, but they at least came and asked, and there are votes. And that has not really happened since that time. So I think this is a tremendous contribution to the debate. As you know, I've got amendments as well, and those would not have happened were it not for your amendment. Frankly, that's the leadership reaching out, beginning to finally realize, wait a minute, there's something wrong here when there's this much bipartisan support. Now, I actually think, Mr. Chairman, I want to not disagree, but I think we're far more danger of the executive having too much war-making authority than too little. Because they certainly haven't lacked for war-making authority in the last 16 years. I don't know any place that they've wanted to go that they haven't. And they've gone some places that I think had they come to Congress with a straight-up vote, let's just take Libya, for instance, I don't think they would have gotten the authority. That was a terrible decision. It was a terrible decision. And I say that in no defense of Muammar Gaddafi, but we went in under a NATO pretext against a country that had not attacked anybody in NATO, that had turned over every one of its WMDs to us. They're all sitting in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, that did not have any terrorist organizations operating within it and striking from it as a home base. And again, that doesn't mean Gaddafi wasn't a butcher. He was. But what was the justification for that? And I promise you, this use of this kind of force, this irresponsibly without debate, is one of the things that encourages the Iranians and the North Koreans to keep or develop nuclear and WMD capability. Because they look at this and say, this is what the United States does to somebody that cooperated with them on everything. They give up their nukes, they give up their WMDs, boom, we're going to take them out. So I think you're making a tremendous contribution. It's why I supported you in Appropriations Committee. And it's why you had the near unanimous support of that committee. I think one of the most striking things was when we had combat veterans getting up after your presentation saying, this is right, we should do this. We know these people, or we've been amongst these people deployed. They do need to know this is a mission the United States wants them to do. I asked, really partly as a result of your amendment, I asked Secretary Mattis, and I know you had an exchange with him. I didn't get to hear it all, but I certainly heard about it right afterwards. And I know he may have disagreed about removing an AUMF before we had one in its place, but he certainly acknowledged to me, and as I understand it did you, yeah, a new AUMF would be a good thing. And the reality is we wouldn't be having this debate today and the possibility of this discussion if you hadn't been doing what you're doing. So I look forward. I so admire and respect what you've done here, because I'm not going to say everything I said earlier. I do think our leadership on both sides of the aisle at different points has tried to protect members from tough decisions. I actually acknowledge that, and to some degree, we create leaders to do that. We create the Rules Committee to do that to some degree. We cast a lot of tough votes up here to keep people from casting tough votes downstairs. So that's just part of the process. But this is a preeminent constitutional responsibility. We are sending men and women to war. They ought to know whether we agree with it or not. If we don't, we shouldn't be doing it, quite frankly. And this country at times has avoided conflict when it shouldn't have. We're not always right in these decisions. I don't think we made real smart decisions in 1940 and 41 when the whole world was at risk. But be that as it may, at least people were willing to take responsibility for the decisions. I think that's all you're asking us to do. And while I would prefer a full replacement before repeal, I agree with your point. You gave us 240 days. I mean, the way some of this has been characterized, it's as if you were pulling the rug out from people. I'd say 8 months is plenty of time to do this if you're serious about doing it and you can reach consensus on it. And if you can't, probably shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be at war unless the American people believe decisively that's what we ought to be doing or willing to support it. So I just want to commend my friend, and I think, frankly, the funding issue, without question, is germane here, without question or debate. That's very appropriate on an appropriations bill. We do it all the time for a variety of things. So anyway, I look forward to this, and I think you started a process, I would hope, whereby the committees of relevant jurisdiction, which have not picked this up, do that, which the administration, and I'm pretty, I want to be fair to the administration. They're not doing anything the last administration didn't do. The last administration said it had the authority to do anything it wanted to do, pretty much any time it wanted to do it. You know what? I've been around long enough to know that all administrations say whatever they do is based in law, and they have the full authority to do it. Doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans. They just do it. That's why we've divided power and tried to restrain them. It's a dangerous thing to give that kind of power. And so I would hope that the committees of jurisdiction pick this up. We're going to have a report from the administration at the minimum that lays out its legal justifications, its targets, its strategy, its estimated cost. Then we shouldn't just accept that. We should have a debate. We should let that thing move through committee. And again, insofar as we've made any progress at all in this in the last few minutes, it's solely due to your efforts. I want to commend my friend. We are very unlikely and unusual allies. If that Afghan funding thing came up, I'd probably vote not to cut it off, and you probably would vote to cut it off. Not that I would pretend to predict your vote, but the point is, you would have taken responsibility for your decision. I would have taken responsibility for my decision, and the Congress collectively would have taken responsibility for its decision. And it seems to me that's the point of what you've been trying to accomplish, is simply make us take responsibility, the same responsibility that Congress gives us. You've been willing to do that, and you've been willing to do it at great political peril. I doubt that was a real popular vote in 2001. But in retrospect, it certainly was a wise vote, and you were correct. So anyway, I look forward to continue to work on this. I think we've made some progress, but I think this is pretty much solely due to you. And the rest of us are trying to rally behind and work with you on this and see that we get the process going. And I hope the administration embraces this. I really appreciate Secretary Mattis in public saying this is something we need to do, not just saying, well, we have the legal authority. They think they do, but this is something we need to revisit. And I would hope if we do, I get asked all the time, do you have a particular AUMF? I really don't. I just want to see it go through the process. And if we did it again, my one big recommendation, and I wasn't here the last time, is I don't think anybody that voted for that thing envisioned we'd still be acting on it this far down the road. We ought to have some sort of periodic 3 to 5 year, some built-in review, so we don't ever go this long again without re-examining something that gives this kind of extraordinary power to any chief executive. And again, I'm not knocking President Obama. I'm not knocking President Trump. I just know presidents, and presidents always think they can do anything they want to do, and they can always find plenty of lawyers to tell them that they're operating within the law. The only thing that pushes them back is whether or not we have the courage to defend our institutional powers in a bipartisan sense and to make sure we don't allow this much authority to evolve in the hands of any single individual ever again. It's dangerous, extraordinarily dangerous. So with that, I mean, this committee's heard from me way too much on this, but this is something, I will say this, when the speaker called me about it, and as I know my friend knows, you very seldom get calls from speakers say, you've just been doing a great job, and I was thinking about you. I just wanted to call you and tell you I'm real happy with what you did. But he came back at me with here's another way, and here's why I'm concerned about it. So I appreciate that, but that call would never have been made if that amendment hadn't been offered in Appropriations Committee, and if there hadn't been enough bipartisan concern that it moved through that committee. And I'm glad you pointed out that people seem to forget this. They were all shocked. I voted for this thing 2 years ago. We had 8 Republicans that voted for it and made it in order then. I think on the 16 bill, if I recall correctly. This isn't new, and that's one of my frustrations. It's not like we haven't been knocking on this door for a long time. And the first, we don't know if we trust President Obama. Well, at least he sent up an AUMF. It wasn't my favorite one, and I would have preferred it be changed, but I would have voted for it if that's all that got to the floor. Because I think it was the right thing to do. And he recognized, if you go back and read his statement, that there needed to be some changes. And, I mean, grudgingly, they'll all admit that, yeah, this needs to be looked at. They've just never found it convenient to come back and do it again. They'll always have a reason why it's not. The gentle lady, my friend, has not accepted that. She's been wise not to do it. And because of that, we have an opportunity now to not only give this the authority I think it needs and let people express their opinion, but put us on firmer footing. And I would hope send a clear signal to the men and women we're asking to fight that they shouldn't have any doubt that the Congress of the United States supports the mission that we've asked them to undertake and risk everything on. So, thank you. I'll try and, I won't do this again, but I apologize. But, yeah, I know. Well, that's why I won't do it a third time. But feel strongly about it. Yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman, Mr. Polis.
Yeah, the last time our nation and Congress declared war was June 5th, 1942. All of the subsequent military actions have been various degrees of these authorizations for military action. I like Mr. Cole's recommendation, the future AUMFs have a sunset provision in it. I think that's very important. But I would also point out the importance of Ms. Lee's amendment, and I think our chair indicated that Ms. Lee would get our vote. Did her vote? Did I hear that correctly when you said that? No, Mr. Chair?
I think what the intent was is that we're going to end up getting the vote quicker than 8 months.
Okay, well, that's great. It's more than just a vote, it's actually passing one, as you know. And I think that the argument about what's in it is very important. I mean, there's a lot of problems with this current one. It doesn't even name or contemplate ISIS. The link is very, tenuous to ISIS. Look, I've been in Congress 9 years. Congress, do they do their job when the clock is running out? That's when we do our job. I mean, we could do spending bills anytime. I would bet anybody here that we're going to be back right before, a day or two before the money runs out for spending the money. That's just the way it works. I don't know why, but I don't think we're going to do an AUMF unless we have a time certain. So I think this, this one that comports with our germaneness rules, prohibits funding for 2001 AUMF after 240 days of enactment of this act. That's fine. It could be any period of time. Let's be honest. If we get to day 239. This Congress would pass a continuation. It's okay, 2 more weeks. Okay, 3 more weeks. That's just, I mean, this Congress is responsible, Mr. Chairman. I mean, Democrats and Republicans are responsible. They're not going to let an AUMF lapse in a dangerous world. But what it will do is the same pressure we have on spending. It'll force the debate. I just don't see it happening absent a timeline and a clock that ticks. Unfortunately, that's for all of our big decisions, and this is a big decision. This is, war and peace. This is the use of our military. This is keeping America safe. For all of our big decisions, Congress only acts as a whole when they're on the clock and they have to. And I think that we have to put Congress on the clock, Mr. Chairman. I hope that we make in order either or both of Ms. Lee's amendments. They both, I think, accomplish something very similar. One would require a additional waiver. The other should be completely germane and simply allowable. I hope they both pass, and I hope we're back working on the AUMF. But otherwise, I really fear, Mr. Chair, I know you said we'll vote on one before 240 days. I don't doubt that, but there's a difference between voting one and passing one, right? We could vote on one any day and not pass it. Passing one into law requires working with the Senate and the President, and that's challenging. And I don't see all those parts coming together unless there's a clock.
I cannot,
Yeah.
what I can tell you is this body needs to pass one.
Yeah, and
Notwithstanding, I
Sure.
can't speak for anybody else. What I will tell you is, this is among the most complex pieces, because all of a
Yeah.
sudden, we're gonna fight for one of our friends. We'll actually say in there, we're gonna go fight if one of our friends needs us.
for NATO, we're going to put it in there.
I'm just saying, we're gonna.
Well,
say
yeah,
that.
I support that. I support our
You may
commitments
be
under
well.
NATO.
All
Yeah.
I'm saying is, it
That's
is
fine.
hard.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, who's our friend?
Well, it's our
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
our
with
NATO
that. All I'm
commitments.
saying is, this
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah.
But we ought to debate it, we ought to put it out there. And
Yeah.
the people that want us out of all these operations are gonna vote no, and everybody else is gonna say, I want to protect the country. And
Well-
we're gonna have the vote, and it'll be fair for everybody. But to say that our people don't know whether we're behind them or not is just not true. We are behind our military.
I didn't make that argument,
I
Mr. Chairman.
didn't say you
Yeah,
did.
okay.
To say that is just not fair to our guys. That's
Yeah.
like saying every firefighter that takes a call, every call does or doesn't matter. We're
Yeah.
behind our police officers, even though we know we have problems, we're behind our firefighters.
And I take the gentleman at his word, and I think that there's a good chance that this body, which is a very efficient body, will probably pass an AUMF if that's what the Speaker wants me to do. But
That's the
yeah.
extent of what I think
Yeah, well-
I could say we owe it to get done.
Okay, well, I think we owe it to actually get it done, which means not just this body, it means the
I'll let
Senate, it
you-
means the President.
I'll let you run for the Senate and you go get it done.
Well, if it's part of an appropriations bill, we put the clock on both bodies, on the whole entity. So that's the difference,
I'm not
Mr.
gonna
Chairman.
put it- I'm not
Yeah.
gonna put that
Yeah.
on whether we pass an appropriations bill. Fund.
No, I get it. And look, I mean, it's like we are appropriating $700 billion this week, but that doesn't mean the money goes out the door. There's still, you know, and we can take some pride in saying we fly appropriations bill through here. We do compared to the Senate. There's no question. The House is faster, thanks in large part to your leadership in this committee, right, Mr. Chairman? We have that process, whereas the Senate is much more difficult. They can't spend $700 billion in a week like we can. But what we really need, again, is I think a clock. I mean, it's just the only way it'll happen. I hope that we make amendment number 96 in order. That one, you know, if we're willing to make the necessary waivers, 95 also would accomplish it. I think it would pass. And I think, you know, again, we all know this appropriations bill is a long way from law also, but at least it would send that signal every step of the way that this is what the House wants. And hopefully our friends across the Capitol would listen, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Other members of the committee? Gentlewoman, Ms. Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect to my good friend Chairman Cole, I really disagree with the notion that we should put in place any kind of an amendment that basically immediately cuts off funding, and with all due respect to the hard work of Ms. Lee, we have to be very careful, as we've discussed in here before, about the message we're sending to our men and women in uniform. And if we go down a path here where we adopt any language that suggests in any way that we are rescinding the AUMF, that we are cutting off funding for the AUMF, and we can all sit here in this body and say to ourselves, well, we've got 240 days, we will get it done. I have my skepticism about that, but I can tell you absolutely for the men and women who are on the front lines fighting to keep us safe, the message to them will be the U.S. Congress has just pulled support from what we're doing and what we've been asked to do. I think that there are some real constitutional questions involved, and I think we've all got to remember that the Constitution does not give Congress the power to make war. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. And that was a very clear decision by the framers. The language was changed by James Madison. The wording to make war was removed because there was concern that that could be interpreted as the power to conduct war, and that is not our power. The power to conduct war resides with the executive. We have crucially important oversight obligations and authorities, and we ought to be conducting those. And I fully support the notion that we need a strategy, that we need to see this new administration put a strategy in place, that the people that we're asking to defend us need to know what the end game is, what the objective is. But we have to be very careful and tread very carefully here as we look at how we can best implement those oversight obligations, and opening up a debate in which we begin that process by saying we're rescinding authority or rescinding funding would be highly damaging. And I think, frankly, all one has to do is go back and look at the end of the Vietnam War and look at the message that it sent to people in the field in Vietnam when Congress stripped funding. If you want to make sure that we're not abandoning our troops, we have to take our obligation for oversight seriously, but we've got to do it in a way that doesn't confuse the people that are fighting for us about whether or not they have our support. So I think as we think about this, we've got to always remember that what we say and do in this body is heard around the world, and we never want to send the message that we somehow don't understand what we're fighting for and that the defense of the nation is not crucial and at the top of our list of priorities. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Further feedback from members? Ms. Lee, I want to thank you for taking time to be with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple points I'd just like to make in closing. I want to first thank.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Pardon?
Gentlewoman's right.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleagues for their comments, and thank you for helping to move this ball forward. This should be, or it should continue to be, a bipartisan effort, and I thank you for that, Chairman Cole. I want to clarify the fact that this is not cutting off funding immediately. There's no way I would do that or even present an amendment that would be close to cutting off funding immediately. This gives us 8 months to do our job, to do what the Constitution requires us to do. Secondly, I'm the daughter of a veteran. My dad was a retired lieutenant colonel. He was in the African American Battalion in Italy, supporting the Normandy invasion, part of the Tuskegee Airmen group. He also fought in Korea, stationed in Korea, and lived in, served in Japan also. And so he served 25 years in the military, and I just want you to know there is no way that I would engage in these actions, in my amendments, my legislation, if I did not believe in our military and our troops and want them to want to ensure their safety and their well-being. I think it's important that they know that we recognize that they're in these new theaters of war that have not been authorized, and that we either will or will not authorize them. And so they know that their members of Congress are debating this with the American people behind them, and that's our job. President Obama presented an AUMF, as Chairman Cole said. I would not have supported that had it come to the floor. I did not support the Libya operation, as Chairman Cole mentioned. That never received an authorization either. And we could go on and on about the wars that we have been engaged in without an authorization, and how this has become a very broad authorization for many, many parts of the world. And so it should continue to be a bipartisan effort, and I hope that one day we will come together and know that we must repeal this, and the substance of what we talked about tonight should be part of the substance of a debate in terms of a new authorization, but we must repeal it, and if we decide to replace it, then we must. But we have to talk about the costs and the consequences of what we're doing, and I think that hopefully these two amendments would move the ball further in that respect. And I'll just close by saying, Chairman Sessions, I swear, I wish someone would tell me, just in terms of process, how in the world was this amendment just taken out in the middle of the night? How did that happen?
It's very simple, and I'll take full responsibility. It was done in appropriations where we were legislating on an appropriations matter. The jurisdiction resides directly within the gentleman from California, Ed Royce, and that is in his committee. The jurisdiction, the AUMF, is very clearly in his committee, and that is where it needs to be.
And so there are no rules that require it to be taken out
Will the
through a
gentleman yield
vote
for
of
a
the Rules
question?
Committee.
Sure, I'm very open to
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
But that's the answer. Did the gentlewoman present that in writing at the time she presented the amendment, the Appropriations Committee?
Did I present what in writing, Mr. Chairman?
The amendment about the AUMF.
In writing? Yeah, yes, I did.
So you gave that to the committee.
Yes.
I've heard that they were unprepared for it.
I think that, Mr. Chairman, I think, and I didn't respond to that in the press because I heard that
I
the
don't
speaker
know.
had said that they did not
That's
really
what I heard. That's why I'm
know what
asking.
they were voting on, or
So
did not have the
you
information.
previously, everybody knew in the committee that that was going to come up.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not what I heard. That's good.
No, it's true. I would not have,
Well, gentleman yields, I can just, and my friends heard me make this point, but just so anybody listening knows, look, what happened, and I understand being, not being happy about it, but it's happened to me. And as a Republican, moving something that was policy-oriented, Native American, on an appropriations bill, I thought with the agreement of the chairman of Natural Resources, and actually I'd negotiated with him, Chairman Calvert had negotiated with Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member McCullum, a group of us were working this deal. We thought we had an agreement, my amendment, and there was just a misunderstanding in that case. and he literally decided he was going to lodge a point of order against it. And so that's what happened, and it never got anywhere. I mean, it didn't get debated here. We had a colloquy down on the floor at my request on this, but there's no question he had the authority to do it. I mean, I would have only moved ahead with his consent. And as I mentioned earlier today, I'd actually gotten that same amendment with the Democratic chairman who had gone, this was Chairman Moran, and talked to Chairman Ray Hall and Chairman Conyers, who had jurisdiction. They had waived the jurisdiction in 2010, so we actually got it across the floor on the Probst bill, didn't make it in the Senate. So I know this isn't much fun when it happens, because it's happened to me, but it is within the rules.
I simply had heard, I don't know, I did not necessarily go check on it, that it was more or less an unplanned amendment that the.
Now, Chairman, I can just tell you, we had talked about the amendment in a Republican meeting beforehand. I actually said, this amendment comes, I'm supporting this amendment. So they knew it was coming. I think they were surprised by the result. And I think, not to overanalyze.
That could be the surprise.
But yeah, we had a couple other
admit
amendments, or members get up that had a big impact in that debate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We followed the proper procedure, regular order. We
Yes, ma'am.
provided the notice. We did everything that
Yes,
we
ma'am.
were
That was my
instructed to
question.
do. And we did that. And I'm just asking, and Mr. Cohen, I guess, Mr. Chairman, you sort of explain how that can be done. I mean, I know the chair of the Rules Committee is very powerful, but I just assumed that if it were going to be removed, that I could come to the committee and make
can.
the case, and
You
it
can.
would be voted out.
Well,
or not.
let me say this. In essence, what I've done is put the proposed bill, the language of the bill that's going to be, that you can shoot against, so to speak, is out there.
It's out there, but there were, I
And I-
believe, 326 pages to that bill, and the only section that was removed was the amendment that we put in.
Well, that may be true. I know we added several pieces.
Well, the one that was removed, I believe, was this
That wouldn't
amendment only.
surprise me because we directly delineated it.
Yeah,
We
and
directly
so
delineate
that's the power of
anything.
the chair of the
Well,
Rules Committee.
gentlemen, yield?
I will.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, it's the Rules Committee's prerogative. So the Rules Committee here can now hope to include your amendment. And if it's not in the chairman's mark, I'll offer an amendment to do that. I'm hopeful it'll be in the chairman's mark for either 95 or 96. 95, the one that repeals the AUMF, does have that cross-jurisdictional issue. But again, we in the Rules Committee can waive that. We do that routinely. That's something we do frequently. We don't have to do it, but we can do it. The other one doesn't even require a waiver as far as I'm concerned. It's a very simple funding limitation that would be appropriate in the appropriations bill. Happy to yield to my friend, Mr. Cole.
And just one more point. I mean, this does happen, and to be fair to the chair, it's really the decision of the chairman of the committee that has the authority. If they request it, they get it basically, or usually do. They do on our side, and I've seen this happen before. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen to other Republican members. And probably our former speaker, Mr. Boehner, was much stricter about this than anybody I've ever seen, about, maybe because he had been an authorizing chairman, restoring authority to the authorizing and not letting appropriators get outside their appropriate lane. So,
And again, we're killing my time. I mean, I think our chairman, Mr. Sessions, was right in saying the responsibility is with him. I think what you're saying, Mr. Cole, is that with Mr. Royce's objection, it put our chairman in a difficult situation.
I don't know that Mr. Royce ever expressed an opinion. In fairness, I did not
Okay.
know that he did. What I did recognize was what I considered and what the speaker considered to be a better alternative to the plan, which is what we submitted. It is not like we ignored it. We did not in any way dish you. We did not try and terminate. We just openly, I tried to respectfully, you met with me, as you recall, in the office.
But, Mr. Chairman, I guess that's two individuals, and I supported Chairman Cole's amendment, but that's two individuals making the decision,
Well,
not
it's
a
actually
Democratic
because
three.
Mr. Cole agreed that with
Sure,
the speaker,
okay.
that we would try and move forward something that we knew the chairman stood firmly for. He believes there ought to be this debate. You can debate that with me about what I believe, but he firmly does believe that. So the speaker Speaker and I understood this.
But that doesn't speak well for our
Well,
legislative
it may or may
process and our
not. What it
democratic
speaks well
process
of
and
is that
regular
it's
order,
well within
Mr.
the
Chairman.
purview that I have as chairman of the committee to accept these things and do them, and I'm trying to accept responsibility.
And again, no one says it's not. I think that we do need to include Mr. Royce and Mr. Engel. I mean, with regards to committee jurisdiction,
Well, I
it
believe
shouldn't
that
be made
Mr.
without.
Royce does recognize the decision that was made, and that Mr. Royce, he had very little to do with what we do, but once a decision was made about what we would ask of that, Mr. Cole knows that the chairman accepted that as a response, never to get out of doing it, but more to the direction we go, so.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, let me thank you for the chance to be with you this evening and just say that I'm very, I won't say disappointed, but I'm just really shocked at this process and how this went down. And I would hope that in the future, I mean, I guess you can do this on any amendment or any bill that you so choose, but to me, and I don't know what other members think, but I would think that in the spirit of bipartisanship and regular order and our democratic processes, that this not be done very often, because this is really wrong.
Once again, even though a committee does what they did, they are legislating on an appropriations
Mr. Chairman, we
matter.
do that, I understand that, and I think in the Appropriations Committee, and I think Chairman Cole can tell you this is done each and every day. In fact, last week, I don't know how many policy writers were put on the Appropriations Committee, but there were dozens.
There are some that are agreed to. I do confess
Yes,
that.
there are
And that is
dozens,
done-
maybe over 100.
That is done, well, as the chairman will tell you, with the approval of the chairman.
With the approval of the chairman of those committees. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that.
There are things that they want to get done, and they know this is a must-pass piece of legislation. I don't need to advise the gentlewoman, she knows this. There are lots of ways to get things done.
Yes.
Lots of people work together. All I'm suggesting to you was, we saw a different way, calculus, parameters, and Mr. Royce was most enamored with the ability that we would have to have the debate. I don't think in any way Chairman Royce is going to shy away from this at all.
No, okay, Mr. Chairman, I think that when you look at the policy writers that were adopted with the committee sanction and blessings, I don't believe there were any Democratic on our side amendments that
maybe
were
that's a
adopted.
point also. What I
And we're
would tell
trying to
you
make
is-
this bipartisan. I mean, if you understand
I
my
understand a lot
position
of
in terms
things,
of the
but-
bipartisanship nature of what we
but-
try to do in the Appropriations Committee.
Yes, ma'am. Well, Chairman McThornberry has a lot to say about a lot of these things, too. And he is very close to his ranking member, and Kay Granger is very close to her ranking member, and there's a lot of ways in which they work together, and we're going to approach the subject.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think that we just have to keep working at it, and I'm going to keep at it.
I think Mr.
And
Cole gave you credit for that one.
It's very important, and I hope it becomes bipartisan, and I hope that, or continues to be bipartisan, and I hope that we're not undermining
I hope-
at every step of the way, because
But
we
you're
have
not,
to
be- you're
feel
not
that
being
we're working
undermined. We're
together.
going to have the debate. I just can't promise its passage by the United States Senate, signed by the president.
I'm
And that's
not-
what we're trying to get to by
Yes.
taking feedback actually from
Yes.
the State Department.
Yeah,
We
Mr.
believe,
President, yeah, the president actually should submit an AUMF for us
Well-
to debate. That's the way it should work. And the reason I've been doing this for so long.
or at least we
is
take their
don't have
feedback.
it.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, they should present it.
I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is we got to approach it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lee, you
I'm
can stick
sorry,
around as
members,
long as you
but,
want.
you
can
know,
stick around
we'll
as long as you
keep
want,
going on.
or-
I mean,
or-
if there were, if we didn't have so many members here, I would want to stay here all night and talk to you
I think
about
you
this.
still ought to, but does the gentlewoman wish more time?
No, Mr. Chairman,
Well, the
I just hope
gentlewoman-
that people understand that, you know, democracy is very important, and the democratic process is important, and members should not be undermined, I don't believe, by 3 or 4 or 5 individuals, if they have worked together and put something together, gotten it in a bill, bipartisan, and then it's ripped out.
Happens all the time. Happens all the
But that
time.
is really a
No,
shame,
no, it's
Mr.
really
Chairman.
not.
That doesn't bode well
We
for
take
this
bills from
body.
different committees and we merge them together all the time. And accountants see things different than bankers, and lawyers see things different than CPAs. And we have to make a decision about which mark will come up here. We do this every day.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman. Well, next
I'm
time-
not saying it makes sense to you, but it makes sense to us. We have to make decisions every day.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we do it sometimes, but I mean, it's not the normal practice of this committee to change
Well,
committee marks.
We do this as bills get together.
We certainly do it sometimes, I would
I think
agree.
it's been done
It
maybe
happens in my world.
two times in the last year or two, maybe 4 times in the previous
No, ma'am,
Congress.
they're what are called managers' amendments. They're what are called managers' amendments, and they happen all the darn time. And that is where I go meet with the chairman and I say, Mr. Chairman, we'd like for you to add this or change this or do that. And they go in and they change that. It's either that or I would come up here and have to do what we're doing now. And all I'm trying to do is carefully allow you to see where it is, delineate it in the report, and look you right in the eye and tell you, we're going to debate this issue.
And
If
you
I were
think-
trying to get out of the debate, then I'd be willing to be run out of town.
No, Mr. Chairman, I understand you said you're not trying to get out of the debate. I guess I'm just, it's just perplexing that this could happen in the middle of the night and without even my
I don't want to
input
put
or
us into a
debate of this rule
circumstance.
committee.
I don't
Rules
want to put
committee.
us into a circumstance where we're not hearing from the administration and we're not effectively going after this. So I appreciate the gentlewoman being up here.
Okay, thank you
Yes,
very
ma'am.
much. Thank you, members. I apologize for this delay,
No,
but
you're
you
doing,
know, this is. an
Mr.
issue
Chairman?
that-
yes,
I ask
yes.
unanimous consent to insert remarks by Mr. Vesey and 2 remarks from Ms. Sheila Jackson-Lee into the record.
Without objection, we'll enter those in the record. Thank you very much. And if the gentlewoman, Ms. Lee, has anything in writing or else some stenographer, welcome the opportunity to see that. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Madam Chairman,